I would like to welcome everyone to our Made in Wenatchee event tonight. I'm Kenny Sturgeon, the Executive Director of the Wenatchee Valley Museum and Cultural Center. I'd like to thank you for joining us tonight for our cider tasting event with Union Hill Cider Company in East Wenatchee. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to thank Union Hill for partnering with us on this event. They have generously donated a portion of the proceeds from tonight's event to the museum, so thank you for purchasing tickets and for participating at home with us. I say hi to all of our members who are out there. If you're not already a member, I invite you to join us. We are open again for visiting in person, and our summer exhibit, Tomfoolery Vintage Fun from Wenatchee Cycle and Toy, opens on May 7th. But we also have some of our virtual programs still going, like this event, some online classes, and some virtual tours. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge that the Wenatchee Valley Museum and Cultural Center is located on the traditional homelands of the Piscosa. We acknowledge the traditional lands and offer respect and gratitude to the Piscosa and to the diverse indigenous peoples that reside in North Central Washington today. Here at the museum, our job is to gather our community, to engage and to educate. And sometimes what the community really needs is to meet over a great glass of cider. I'd like to introduce you to our other hosts tonight. The first is Casey Koski, the museum's curator of exhibits and enjoyer of cider. Casey and I are joined tonight by Drew and Katja Handley. Drew is one of Union Hill Company's co-owners and Cidermaker. While we taste, they will talk with us about the boom in the cider industry, their transition into it, as well as the ins and outs of cider in general, and I hope cider making, because I would love to learn more about that. So welcome, Drew and Katja.
Awesome. Thank you, Kenny. So introduction, I'm Katja.
I'm Drew.
My husband, Drew. And our company is Union Hill Cider, and we come from an orcharding background. And so I know in this valley, that's a big thing because that is kind of the history of this valley. And so I'm excited to talk a little bit more. Definitely Drew is more in the orcharding than I am. I'm kind of just the professional taster and and I do some of our sales and social marketing as well. And so today we are going to go through a tasting. I know everybody has their 3 bottles, and we included little tasting sheets, and I was supposed to have one too with me, but I just have it on my computer. Perfect. Your tasting sheet that came with your kit. And we're just going to go in that order, starting with the hard harvest and then ending with Cosmic Rosé. And so I think I like to start by opening a bottle just so we can.
Yeah, why don't we?
Taste one.
Opening the bottle and we can talk and drink at the same time.
While you're opening that, sorry, I just want to invite any of the people at home, if you have any questions or want to jump in and ask anything of Katja and Drew, please just put it in the chat, or the Q&A box will work just fine too.
Yep, yeah, that sounds great. We'll be monitoring the chat, and then if any questions come up, we'll try to address them. If we don't, it's probably because we missed it, but we'll come back around to it. But yeah, we'll start by opening up our hard harvest.
You want to talk about the hard harvest?
Yeah, so this is our kind of, I guess it'd be our traditional cider. So when you think of just a pure hard cider, this is kind of what we wanted to go for with that.
And so for all of our ciders, and we'll go into a lot more about talking about cider making and kind of what makes our ciders different and what we like to focus on. But one thing for sure, especially because we come from orcharding, we are very focused on the cider varietals, as you can probably see in your sheets. So this one was just kind of 4 of our favorite cider varietals and then 1 culinary apple. So we did this one as Kingston Black, Porter's Perfection, Dabinet, Snowdrift Crab, and then Pink Lady we use as a base. And so this is just a nice, like almost like a field blend of some of our favorite ones. And it is a very tannic cider. So a lot of the apples that we use in cider making are going to be apples that you don't necessarily eat. And so the apples that we grow are specifically for cider making. I'll probably let you talk a little bit more about
the best apples that you can have in cider are the worst apples that you can eat fresh off the tree. So these apples will be very astringent, have a lot of tannin, very high in acidity. And so they don't make a good eating apple, but what's nice is those those bold flavors come through the fermentation, and so you still get a lot of apple characteristics that shine through. Whereas with dessert fruit, once you're done fermenting, most of your flavors were within the sugar, and so the yeast ate all the sugar, so you've lost a lot of your flavor. So that's why it's really nice to be able to use these cider varietals. And then we always want to showcase the apples in each of our ciders. So we make it a pretty big point on our bottles to say what we're using, so we can kind of educate the consumer about what apples they should look for in cider if they want something a little more interesting. So just like with wines, if you really like Cabernets, then you're going to look for that, right? And it's nice to have it on the bottle so you know that it's there. And so that's kind of what we want to do too, is be able to give that to consumers so they know if they're looking for a specific type of apple, then they can find it on the bottle and they can kind of figure out what apples they really like in ciders. So we really want to bring focus to that.
So where do you guys source your apples from?
So we're in a state cidery. We grow all of our own apples. We grow our apples out in Quincy, also in Mattawa, and then here in East Wenatchee. So kind of all over, but that's where our family farms are at. And so we kind of have it spread among the three of them.
Nice.
Yeah.
And it gives us a lot of control over our products too, since we're the ones that are growing them. We can pick them at the right time. We can plant the varieties that we really enjoy. And so that's what we've done. We've kind of curated our selection of apples to some apples that we really enjoy, and then have kind of brought them out to the market so that we can, share that with other people.
Interesting.
And so our hard harvest too, this was one of our first blends. We had kind of 3 ciders that we started with, and this was one of the first ones. And the name obviously comes from our orchard background, and we're trying to come up with something that kind of encompassed, what we do. And we're thinking, well, harvesting is hard and it's also part cider, and, and just like having, I don't know, to me, I think of like going through your day, your hard harvest, and then at the end of the day, having your cold glass of cider from, the apples that you harvested the year before. And so that was kind of our fun background on how we named this cider. And as for tasting notes, we've done tasting notes. I put a couple in the notes for you guys as well, but we like to have most people explore those for themselves. Our ciders definitely have a big nose to them. So when you guys are drinking this too, kind of just like wine, you can definitely get a nose on it. Some of them are a little bit more floral. This one has a pretty fruity nose. And like sometimes depending on the blend and year, we have a couple different ones. They can come across almost a little bit more earthy, or, some people have like grassy notes, but this one, I don't know. I describe this one as like zesty and complex. And it has like that big mouth feel too. When you drink it, you can kind of feel it in the back of your tongue. And so this is just a great, like, everyday cider that we really, I guess, had for new drinkers and seasoned drinkers, because it has some of those more bold tannins from our cider apples in there. So hopefully you guys are enjoying that.
And all of our ciders are fairly dry too. So we try not to sweeten any more than we have to, because we really want the apples to shine through. By adding a little bit of sugar back, we're able to bring out a little bit more of those flavors, but we definitely don't want to cover them up. So that's why we very minimally back sweeten. So you'll notice that through all of our ciders, they'll be a bit drier. And a lot of times the sweetness you do get is more of a perception of sweetness. So like with our barrel aged, you'll get that because you'll get some of those vanilla notes from the oak, and that'll kind of add to the sweetness that you taste. So that's just one of those things I like to mention, because a lot of people too, when they think of cider, they think of like a really sweet beverage. And sometimes, it can really throw you off if that's what you're expecting. And then you come into some ciders like what we make and they're drier. So we always like to let people know that we are doing drier ciders.
Yeah.
I found a lot of the commercial varieties of ciders, the big ciders, the big guys, are often really, really sweet. And so that misconception has kind of been led by those big commercial producers. And when you find these, small local craft brewed ciders, it's refreshing. They're lighter, they're drier, and it's not overly sugary like some of those big commercial beverage companies are producing. And so this is delicious.
Oh, thank you.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I know. No, it's very interesting to talk to people who have drank cider before or haven't drank cider, because there is a misconception, I would say, with a lot of cider, just because you have big places like Angry Orchard and they also do some fabulous cider making, but a lot of their like main industry cider that they push out, to the public is very sweet and very like, alcoholic apple juice almost. But so a lot of people have that already in their head, like, oh, cider, no, I don't like sweet drinks, I'm good. And so we definitely have that, especially when we do tastings, that people are surprised about, what it tastes like.
Well, and it's such a new category too, that, people, you really can make cider whatever you want to make it. So right now people are really experimenting and all over the place trying to figure out what can cider be. And so in a way it's kind of like beer, where it's like, you can put a lot of adjuncts in it and you can do a lot of really fun things with it. And it's like kind of like wine though too, in the same degree, where it's like you have these specialty apple varieties you can use and pull a lot of tannins and stringency out. And so it really can be anything it wants to be. And so right now, there's a struggle between producers and consumers of, for producers, we can make it just about anything. And it's cider's a really good base for a lot of different things. So like we do a hop cider. And it actually is really good. So it's like, if you want to have a gluten-free IPA, basically, it's a great platform to do that. And so we do like a wet boil with our hop cider and boil our hops in there. And then we do a dry hopping for aroma. And it's really good. But so since it can be all these different things, we need to be careful not to get too lost in the array of all these different things it could be, and try to also find, some of the areas that it really shines well. So.
Yeah, I could see that. I moved over here from Seattle, and at one point my stepdaughter came up and we took her cider tasting somewhere in Woodinville, just some warehouse, and the sheer number and types of cider with fruits and or herbs and or stuff I never thought you would put in cider was a little overwhelming, quite honestly. It's like, oh, I don't know what to choose. So, but yeah, it's an interesting and very versatile kind of base you've got there.
It is. I know that they're trying to, the whole cider industry has kind of been growing over the last 10 years or so. And they've been trying to categorize more. So you do like cider competitions and everything. They're starting to emerge these different categories. So then you kind of know where your cider fits in, like the ones you were talking about. You have like your fruited ciders and your flavored ciders. And then, now there's also rosé ciders and just different categories. And yeah, it's always growing. And I feel like they're starting to kind of put names to things and trying to make it so everybody's on the same page with what cider is and what kind of types of cider there are.
Yeah, and as they finalize these categories, it'll really help the consumer too to go, oh, I like these subset of ciders. I don't like these subset of ciders. And then they can know I do like cider. It's just maybe I don't like these ones, and maybe I do like these ones instead. So I think that'll really help once the industry does kind of figure out what their categories are of ciders, so that we can kind of label it as that, so people know what they're getting into. Yeah. Right now, a lot of ciders, you really don't know what you're getting into, because they're, the labels won't say a lot. And that doesn't mean they're not good. It's just, you just don't really know what you're getting into when you buy a lot of bottles.
Yeah.
We try to be transparent. I think that's our main, I don't know. I love doing that. When I shop, I'm always like looking at ingredients and trying to figure out what's in there. So really that is something we strive, is just to be transparent with what's in our cider, what apples we're using. We don't sulfite our cider either. So if anybody's listening, I know we forget to.
I know we didn't make a big enough emphasis on that early on, and we probably should have, but yeah, no sulfites for our ciders. We know people get headaches and have other problems with them. And so we would just rather not. We'd rather just keep our process clean and keep that stuff out just with good business practices.
Huh.
So no sulfites, and they're all gluten-free. So if you guys have gluten-free friends and things like that, I think all cider is. I mean, I can't speak for everybody unless they're like putting bread in it or something. But even like our hop ciders are gluten-free, and so is most cider. So it is a fun new emerging thing too. I know the whole gluten-free trend is growing here as well. So I think that's why cider has been growing. But we can, if you guys are ready, I think we can go on to the next one. And then,
Sure.
I don't know, I had some fun notes too about like the history of cider and just kind of how cider
We
got
can
to where it
probably
is.
get into that with the next bottle.
Yeah.
So the next bottle will be our barrel aged. So this has been aged 8 months or more in red wine barrels.
Oh, that smells really good.
So this one, we got the idea too. So we actually, our location here, we're in our tasting room, as you can see, and we're looking out right now. We're right up the street from Martin Scott Winery. And so when we first started all this and wanted to experiment with some things, we actually asked Mike Scott to borrow, or not borrow.
We asked him if we could
to
have some red wine barrels.
Some red wine barrels to experiment with, and that's kind of how my husband came up with this barrel aged cider.
Yeah, we thought it'd be a really fun thing to do. And I mean, you could literally throw a rock over to Martin Scott Winery. So we just walked over there and said, hey, Mike, would you have any barrels that we'd be able to buy from you? And he had a couple that we were able to do. I really wanted Tempranillo barrels, but he wasn't really sure he knew that they were red wine barrels.
Yeah.
But he didn't know anyone was going to use them for that. So he just set them aside. So we said, okay, that's great. Red wine barrels sounds good. So we aged our first iteration of this product. We did pinatas and snowdrift crab. So that was our first version. So we called that barrel aged 2. And this is our barrel aged, which is kind of our final version of this product. And we use pink ladies instead of the pinatas. And then we use Porter's Perfection and snowdrift crab. And then we aged them for a minimum of 8 months in red wine barrels. Some of your bottles might be aged longer, so 8 to 12 months is kind of what we're going for.
And so the nose on this one, you can definitely tell.
You get a lot of the barrel.
That it's been aging. You have that oak and just almost a little bit of that red wine too.
And you get a really nice red wine finish to it.
It's really
this one's a really fun, I don't know, all times of year. We thought maybe of just having like a fall release, but we've kept it. Now we've had it for I think almost 2 years in rotation, just because it's a really popular one and a fun thing too to have. You know, we do have a lot of people that come into the tasting room that are like strictly wine drinkers, and then this is kind of a fun introduction for them. Like, well, you know, maybe try this one and see what you think, because that at least has some of those characteristics of your red wine, and you also get some of those oak notes in there just from it aging in the oak barrels.
And are you getting a good response from them when you do that from people who
so far? I think so. I mean, we haven't had anybody who's hated our ciders, at least in my experience, where I'm like, you know, most people are more surprised, because I do think
it's all very positive. Yeah. We get a lot of surprise here where people think they're not going to like what we're offering to them, and they find out that they really do, and they become fans right away. So
nice.
It's been really enjoyable to kind of see that happen.
Yeah, because I think most of the time people are just turned off by they don't want that sweet cider, and are looking for something, you know, and more complex. And this too, because we use cider apples, you get a lot more. You can have a tannic cider and something that's
you get a lot more body and a lot more better mouthfeel.
A lot closer to wine than people are expecting. I think honestly the most disappointing I've had is if someone's looking for like a sweet cider, and that is something that we do have one.
That is the most disappointment we get, is mostly people coming in and saying your stuff's too dry.
Every once in a while, but I mean, usually people love it, but definitely, if you have a cider drinker that's looking for really sweet, then unfortunately our sweetest one is still kind of a semi-sweet category. So,
well,
but otherwise, I think we've had positive reactions. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah. So how long have you been making cider?
So I've been making cider, I guess, for probably about the last 8 years or so. So we started out, since I was an orchardist and I was working for my dad at the time, we were growing apples, and cider was kind of becoming this new category and really starting to emerge. And so me and my roommate thought, okay, let's make some ciders. We have basically unlimited access to fruit, so we'll make some hard cider and we'll kind of see what we can do with it.
Mm-hmm.
So we just made the worst cider imaginable because we didn't know what we're doing. I mean, we had an idea, but so we went over to stands, we bought carboys, we bought everything we needed and put it in our closet, and it was just terrible. But from there, we learned a lot, and so kind of read up more. So it was harder than we thought it was going to be because we had no idea what we were getting into. But we learned a little bit more about how to brew and how to control fermentations. And so from there, a couple of years later, I was able to intern with Snowdrift. And so I interned over there for a little bit and kind of got to learn the process a little bit more. And then just lots of reading, lots of experimenting and practicing.
Mhm.
And we were able to kind of start honing in on the craft a little bit. And then what we ended up doing is we had to replant some orchards, and we ended up talking to Snowdrift and trying to figure out what varieties that we liked. So we were able to source 6 different varieties from them and plant them out in this new orchard. And kind of from there, we said, okay, well, if we're planting these, we need to do something with them. So then we really kind of got into it. And that was about 4 or 5 years ago now. And just been experimenting and learning and going from there. A lot of it's trial and error, and a lot of it's also, I would say, like lucky mistakes too.
Mhm.
So a lot of my favorite products we do, we're kind of just like, we're not sure what we're doing, we'll just try this, and it happened to work out like fantastically. So it's just being pretty open to experiment with things and do stuff that we weren't sure if it was going to work out has really paid dividends in making really fun and unique products, I think.
That's excellent. That's fantastic. We did get a question in the chat. Someone wanted to know if you release experimental batches from time to time at the tasting room.
Yeah, basically we do. So for our cider club right now, we've been releasing all of our new batches to them. We have a series, or limited series, I'll pull a bottle out, that we do. So for very small batch things that may not even be repeatable, we do that. So we have right now at the tasting room, we have our Surly. So it's basically it's a barrel aged cider that was aged on the lees, and we did batonnage, which is a wine thing where you stir up the lees throughout fermentation and after during the rest period. So this is kind of what the bottle looks like. I know it'll be hard to see, but it's just a black label, and then we have a secondary label that says what it is, what is going on with it. So yeah, we release these in the tasting room. You can pick it up usually and get it on draft or get it in bottles because we want people to be able to experience it, even if it is only going to be a very limited run.
Nice.
One of the things you had covered just recently about the orchards, I was going to ask about that. First off, I didn't have this information in front of me when I found out I was going to be co-hosting. And so I was going to ask if it was all estate-grown apples. And I was curious if you had that estate access and chose the varieties that you were going to grow specifically knowing that you were going into cider, or if it came along a little more like you said, where at some point you had to replant an orchard and then you decided to go a little bit more into some of the cider varieties versus the commercial apple varieties that are grown here. So thank you for clarifying that for us.
Yeah, no problem at all.
And I think we've seen that, to your question, we see a lot of the other ciders that we know that have orchards. Like there's even the small, there's Steel. I don't know if you guys have heard of Steelhead up in Chelan, but he's a friend of ours, and he has his own little orchard as well. And so he started out kind of making cider and kind of realized too, like, I really want to be working with apples that have a little bit more going on. So he kind of transitioned over and started planting more of these cider varietals. And I feel like we hear that a lot with places that are wanting to make cider, or like, hey, my family has like 5 acres of, Golden Delicious or something, and then they'll try to do something with that, but usually end up to planting some of the actual cider varietals to blend with that, because that sometimes you only need a little bit too. With ours, we do use like Pink Ladies, for example, as a base, and that's, a regular eating apple, but it is very acidic, but it blends really nice with some of these other varieties that we have.
Well, and some of these cider varieties too are very intense. And so if you were going to have a product with just those varieties, especially for people that aren't familiar with cider. It's going to be kind of a turnoff. I mean, because they're going to be very tannic, very astringent, and just somewhat unpleasant. So like we have a bottle here. This is our Porter's Perfection. I know the lighting is really tough, but Porter's Perfection it's a great apple, especially for blending. By itself, I recommend people need to age it for a minimum a year to a year and a half before it gets anywhere near drinkable, just because it is so bold and so intense. And so it really needs a long maturation process. So what we like to do, especially for the ciders that we have here today, is we like to blend back with other dessert fruits to kind of help, I guess, even out some of those harsher notes and really bring forth the more desirable flavors. So most of the cider fruit you can use it by itself, and a lot of times it is really good. It takes a very long time, and kind of knowing how to deal with it, and how to I guess age it out correctly to get it to be something that's desirable in the future.
Drinkable, enjoyable, something you want to drink.
So how long can you keep cider? Not you, but like me, general people. How long?
If you put it in your fridge,
there,
it'll last basically forever.
No.
So
Okay.
it is like wine, where it'll last quite a while.
Definitely our bottle products. We do some canned products, and obviously cans are more porous.
In a can, since cider is fairly acidic, over time, over a couple of years, it will eat through the liner of your can. So those do have a shelf life of about 1.5 years to 2 years. And then after that, you need to be done. But our bottles, and that's what we really like doing bottles, is you can put it in your fridge, come back to it in 5 years, and all you're going to have is a better product. Because as it ages, it'll only get better.
Nice. That's good to know.
That's been a tough, project for us, is setting aside cases of batches that we want to save for.
We're not very good at it, but maybe somebody else is.
No, but we've some of our favorites. We've tried to set aside some so then we can do a tasting of it, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, and maybe compare it with our same product, but not aged for 10 years. And so that's been something we're looking forward to.
That would be really interesting. Unfortunately, that's pretty much all you can do because you can't go back and remake it, I guess. So, but
right. I know it just have to be like that, you'll just have to enjoy it in the moment, but we're excited about that. And then while we can wait, I think our last one's a Cosmic Rosé that we're excited to go over. And I don't know, how are you guys doing on your tasting? We move on to that one, or we can chat a little bit more and go over some of the history of cider.
Well, I was going to answer this comment.
There's a question.
So where you can buy our ciders, you can buy them in the tasting room here in East Wenatchee. We're out by Pangbourne Airport out here. Or also throughout East Wenatchee, you can find us in like Poor PJs and Plaza Superjet.
All the ones that kind of serve local craft,
Western Market. The Natural Food Store.
Yeah.
The Stamilt store out by the North End Bridge, and then you can find us in Seattle and Tacoma at the Total Wines and the Bevmos out there, and in Spokane also.
Yeah, great. Right now we are just Washington based. I mean, we're still really small, so we self-distribute. So any place that we are in stores,
it's because we drove there.
We go there, we drive there and deliver ourselves and everything. So still pretty centralized around Wenatchee, and then over in Seattle, just because they have a bigger market and everything. So
yeah. And do you guys ferment your cider and bottle on site?
Yeah. So right now we're sitting in our tasting room, and this was our original production facility. So this is a barn out at my grandpa's old property.
You guys can see the size. This is the size. Like, we're sitting right at the end, so it's not very good here.
So he had an old barn, and we said, "Hey, can we turn that into our production area?" And he said, "Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead and do it." So we gutted it and kind of got it ready to produce cider in. So put a floor drain in and made cider here for the first 1.5 years of our company. Then what we did is we moved about 2 blocks over, so I mean about a mile away or half a mile away, over to my father's house, because we had some orchard out there, and we said we need more space. We need way more cold room. So we built a building out there. So it's just about 2 blocks, half a mile away from us here, in some of our orchards. And that's where we produce our cider from now.
Yeah, and so we do the whole, harvesting in the fall. So once we harvest, we press the apples and they can sit in our cold storage for a little while, but it's not like as fancy as to milk where we have the oxygen taken out and keep them for years. So we just have a cold storage and we keep the bins there. And depending on which apple variety it is, different time of harvest, it's all between August and November.
Yeah, well, it starts in September and then goes all the way to November. So that gives us, a period where we can start pressing along with the harvest. And we try to keep up. We never do. Maybe sometime we will. But yeah, so we'll be pressing all the way here until April or May with just different varieties. So some can store better. So just over time, we've learned what varieties we can store longer. So usually and generally, the later in the year you pick it, the longer it'll store. So, which it makes sense, right? Because it had more time to spend on the tree. And so, you're not taking as old a fruit. And so we know what varieties we need to press in what order. So we generally press them in the order of when they would go bad if we didn't.
Yeah.
And then, so after and we do the pressing all in our facility with a big belt press. And then after that, it goes over to tanks for fermentation.
Yeah.
Right?
And we like to do a really nice, cool, long fermentation and just let the yeast do their thing. And we don't overstress them out at all. So we use a champagne yeast and we ferment at 49 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which lets them go fairly slow and take their time. The nice thing about apples is they are very nitrogen rich. And so you have a lot of other micronutrients in there that yeast like. So generally they're not going to be overstressed. And then you can add a little bit of nutrients into, we will throughout the fermentation just to help them keep going along, keep them happy so they don't put out any off flavors and they, take their time and, have a good time while they're doing it.
So I always imagine like little bugs in there, like eating things. I don't know.
Kind of.
They are very busy little buggers.
Yes. Yeah. So we do. Yeah. Then it ferments, and then usually we after fermentation we store it, and depending on what product it is, we store it either in our red wine barrels, or now we have just different wine barrels too, and then also we can store them in.
So we have stainless steel tanks to store them in, and IBCs, plastic IBCs. And then wine barrels, and we've started new products where we're using whiskey barrels. So we're excited about that.
That's a secret. That's our next one coming up. And then it sits, usually all of our stuff ages for at least 6 months.
At least 6 months. We really want it to mellow out and be, really desirable product. So definitely having a long aging time really helps.
And then we do a bottling party where we, make everybody come out and, and
it takes about 3 or 4 of us to do a bottling day, just because we do everything by hand and we have like the simplest of simple equipment. So nothing fancy over here. It is just we fill every one of these bottles by hand, cap them all by hand.
Very loved. We put the labels on by hand with we have like a little machine, but it's all.
Yeah, so we like to say, everything is handmade over here. I mean, from putting the trees in the ground, we do it by hand. Picking them, we do it by hand. Pressing the bottom, it's all by hand here. There's really not a lot of machinery involved because it's a hard industry to have a lot of specialized machinery in.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they have not made robots yet that pick apple trees. They're always working on new technology, but
it's going to be a while.
Still, we pick them by hand. So.
Well, it is definitely a labor of love for you guys.
No. Well,
I think now's a good time. We'll move on to the Cosmic Rosé.
This one's my personal favorite right now, I think, just for the spring. This is one that we did with living in Washington. I'm sure some of you have tried the Cosmic Crisp apple. So that came out, WSU, created this apple to be the perfect eating apple, which if you guys have tried it, excuse me, you guys have tried it. To me, I love it. I think it is the perfect apple, but it's just, it's a cross between
Enterprise and Honeycrisp.
And so we started growing that apple when it first came out. So 2-3 years ago. 3
Yeah.
years ago.
And so what happened was, is 2 years ago, we planted these trees, and we planted a couple of acres, and there was like an apple every now and again. And so my grandfather actually went out and picked the whole orchard. He can barely walk, but he picked the whole entire orchard, which only came out to maybe like a half a bin. But he said, "Hey, do you guys want to do something with this?" And we said, "Yeah, we'll turn it into cider. We'll see how it goes." And the interesting thing about Cosmic Crisp is it doesn't. So when you cut it, it doesn't brown, so it doesn't oxidize very quickly. I mean, you can cut those apples and leave them on the counter for like 6 hours, and they won't brown. It's just like a really feature of them. But what we found is when we fermented it out, so when you press the juice, it comes out very like hazy white, and then when you ferment it, a lot of that hazy white is just the pulp and other sediment from the apple insides, and that'll settle out, and it'll be a very clear cider. So what we thought would be a great idea is we also grow a red fleshed apple where the inside's red. It comes out with a really nice dark red juice. We thought, why don't we combine the two, have a really like nice pink colored cider. We also really love our red flesh cider that we do. We put it in a lot of our other products because it has a lot of floral notes, a lot of berry notes too. So we think it's a wonderful apple. So we thought it'd be really fun to mix these two together. And we actually really liked what came out from it. So we started off by selling that just at the tasting room in glasses. And this last year, we had a big enough crop of Cosmic Crisp that we actually could make a decent amount of this cider. So we decided to make it an actual product that is like a main product of ours.
Yeah.
We had another question come up in the chat. We had another question come up in the chat. It's, do you have a core lineup of ciders that anchor your cidery, or is the cider different every year?
So we have, I would say like a core, we do have core products. So we have 3 that we've had
Four,
since
I would say.
the beginning, and then the barrel age that got added on. So, so from our core, Hard Harvest and Barrel Age are part of our core. And then we have one called Pink Heart, and then our hop cider, our hopped and hazy. Those were our start, and we've kept them. I don't know that we've decided if we're going to keep
that would
them
be our core ciders
forever, but I think
and I think we'll add on. So like Cosmic is also going to be probably added on to our core series of ciders.
Then we try to come up with fun ones.
And then we have lots of different things that we can do at the tasting room. And then single varietal ciders too is something that we like doing through the tasting room, just so that people can experience the apples we use, unadulterated, just those apples. Because once you try them in single varietals, you can really pull those flavors out of the other ciders that we use those same apples with. So we think that's kind of a fun way to showcase them.
And to the question, I saw if we said Honey Crisp, so it's the one that is in this is Cosmic Crisp, which is a cross between
Enterprise and Honey Crisp.
Yes. So Cosmic Crisp and Red Flesh. What I think is fun too is Cosmic Crisp right now is like the biggest thing, I guess, in the apple world, apple industry. And the Red Flesh apple, on the other hand, is one of the biggest things in the cider world. Like, it is a very revered thing to have, and people are always looking for red fleshed apples because it's very unique. They actually originated in Kazakhstan, which I thought was interesting. And then eventually, they started growing them over here. And it's actually like you bite into it and it's red all the way through. Our kids love it. They think it's so much fun. So every time during harvest, they always go out. I'll even put them in their lunches sometimes. And then, they take them to school and like, oh, everybody's all amazed at their red apples. And so I think it's really fun that we kind of married those together in this Cosmic Rosé. And it has been, one of our most popular. And we also, in this cider, really wanted to, I guess, showcase, Wenatchee, and just because we're from here and our cider's from here. And so what I love about this one too, and I'm sure you guys saw the artwork there, we've got Saddle Rock featured on it. And so my sister-in-law is the one who does all the artwork. And so we had her do this on a big watercolor for our label. And so this one's near and dear to my heart because it's our kind of Wenatchee cider and an ode to our valley and just our iconic Saddle Rock.
This one has a really nice floral nose to it. It smells so spring-like and like you're walking in the blossoms.
Yes. I know. I think this is a perfect spring cider. And that's kind of, we released it beginning of this year, hoping for it to be out in stores by spring and everything, because I think it makes it just a perfect cider for this time of year.
Well, I think
And
it's
then
my favorite of the three so far. And thank you for sharing this one. And we did get a question in the chat. Someone was wondering what food you might pair with these three different ciders. And also thank you for making them dry.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome.
So a favorite, this is really funny, but Cheez-Its apparently is, if
Oh,
you're
pair
looking
really
for
good
a
with cider.
junk food to
Cheez-Its.
pair with it, is all of us on our team apparently have decided that Cheez-Its is like the perfect cider pairing food.
I know it doesn't sound very fancy, but it does go really well together.
But as for like your meals, I think on this one, I usually do notes for some of our lineups. And this one, I don't know that I paired anything specific, but acidic food, I always love doing like something savory, pork, you know, something that just really has the opposite. I feel like an acidic cider like that really will complement that well. So I'm thinking of like an example of food, but like I don't want to say pork roast, but like bacon, and I'm thinking of like the Wenatchee pizza over at South Rock. That's a good one. They do like a bacon and apple and cheese.
Oh,
Very savory, and I don't, you know, pizza and cider always goes well together. But usually, yeah, more savory, fatty kind of foods. And I love, did you say Cheez-Its? Yes.
Yes, and Cheez-Its and goldfish, I assume are also very good.
Ryan thinks they are.
Yes, but just depending on the blends. I know like Hard Harvest. Well, I'm a big Thai food person too, and so usually for like Thai food, I like to do a Hard Harvest or barrel aged because they're not quite as acidic as some of our like our Cosmic and our Pink Heart, and I feel like that goes really well with like a Thai curry. I feel like they complement each other versus one of them. Sometimes your food overpowers what you're drinking, or your drink overpowers your food, and so that always. Thai is always a good pairing as well, I feel like. So just kind of depends on what your favorite thing is. But acidity, I feel like is always good with savory and fatty.
Nice.
So,
Nice.
yeah. Yeah, and I don't know, did you guys have more questions? And we can also, I mean, talk about kind of.
I do not. I know you had some cider trivia
Background. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I always think it's interesting just, you know, because we've been talking about just the growing in our valley and where cider is. And it's fun to think about that cider was actually like the most common beverage in the colonial times. So they would have, you know, different apple trees, and because of how apple trees grow. So when you grow an apple tree from seed, it doesn't produce the same apple that you would think. You know, you can't just take a seed from an apple and grow the same apple. So you'd have all sorts of different varieties that would be growing back then. And most of the time they were apples that weren't super appetizing.
So they say like when you plant seeds, it's about 1 in every 10,000 trees that you plant from a seed are going to be fairly edible for, you know, eating. And so that means, you know, 9,999 of them are going to be terrible. But what it means is you can put them all together and make really good ciders with them. So generally that's, in the old world, what they would do is you'd plant all your trees, or, you know, plant all these seeds, and all the trees that came up, you would say, okay, these ones are going to be the ones for eating. These ones are going to be the ones for cider. And so you had all these old orchards up until Prohibition. And then they cut them all down because there was no use for these trees with alcohol being illegal. So they cut them all down. And once Prohibition was over, those trees were gone. And there's nothing you can do about it. So what happened is there was still, you know, the German heritage of beer making, and none of those people left. They still knew how to make beer. So once Prohibition ended, they started making beer, and that really took off in popularity. And cider just had nowhere to go because they had lost all their trees.
And
grain was
easily
cheap.
available too. And so it kind of died out. So I mean, back then, you know, I don't know, read a lot of our forefathers drinking cider, and it's just like a fun little fact. And late like 1800s, I think cider just started dying off. And then that's why it seems like a newer thing, because if you look at the cider industry, really the last 10 years, it has just like crazy boomed in the United States. If you look over in Europe, it's definitely been more of a steady part of their culture, and
Because they never really lost it over there.
They never lost their love for cider and cider making, but during after Prohibition, it was really just, we also had the Industrial Revolution, and so you had less farmers and also less apple trees, and so it was really just some of those like family farms that kept making cider throughout that, but just nothing that was shared with the rest of the world. And right now it is the largest or fastest growing alcohol industry, or in the alcohol industry, is the cider category as of this moment. I know like hard seltzers are growing as well and have become more popular, but cider is still the one that's fastest growing. And so I just think that's fun to know that it is such a part of our history back then, and then it kind of died off, and now people are really getting back into it and starting to learn about cider and how to traditionally make cider and how they did it back then, and using the right kind of apples. And
well, and what's funny too is over in Europe, they never really have lost it, but in the United States, as ciders really started reemerge, and like the energy and enthusiasm that's come with this reemergence of cider has actually helped them to start to, revitalize their cider industry, because it was seen as very much so a poor man's drink, and it really, was pushed off to the side and said, oh, it's cider, there's other better drinks to have. And so what's been fun is this movement in America has actually really helped to spur their cider industry to kind of get back, like that has brought life back to the European cider industry a little bit too, which has kind of been fun to see.
That's really interesting.
Surprised me. Go ahead, Kenny.
No, I was just saying that was really interesting. I haven't really admit I don't give a lot of thought behind any of the things I imbibe in or drink, or even the non-alcoholic ones. So that's actually really interesting history. Thank you.
It really surprised me when I moved here about 20 years ago to find out that Wenatchee was the apple capital of the world, but there were so few ciders at that time. Like I said, this was 20 years ago, and acknowledging that there have been a lot of new cider makers in the area. I think it's great, but I couldn't believe that with all of the apple production here that there wasn't cider at that time. Yeah. But that's just me. I love cider. Yeah. So
I love it. Amen, sister. No, that's funny because I've been saying that. I'm like, this is the apple capital. There should be cideries everywhere. Like we need to have a cider fest along with, like Apple Blossom and all the things.
Yes.
That's, part of my
and we have a really great region for growing apples too, especially for cider. Our harsh climate, with our
we had a question in the chat. Do you put your cider in kegs, and is a keg available? Are you pouring it on tap anywhere locally?
Yeah, so we do have cider available in kegs. We do pour. We have taps here at the tasting room. You can always find us at McGlynn's. They always carry our cider on tap. And then you can find us every now and again too at Columbia.
We rotate, so a lot of places in town rotate with the different cideries. So like Columbia Valley, Wenatchee Valley Brewing, and then also
Milepost 111. Milepost. Bushel and Bee. We've been on at Badger. So yeah, there's a lot of rotating taps, and we'll get on rotation every now and again at a lot of places.
So it's hard to always know where at, but definitely the Glens.
The Glens always has us.
We're always on, and then if you want some here at the tasting room too, and we have on our website too. We do list kind of out some of the places that you can find us. But yeah, with restaurants it's hard because it's always a on and off kind of thing.
So our best bet is to go to your tasting room.
Exactly.
Yes. If you want anything that we make, this is the best place to find it.
Wonderful. Well, Casey, if you have any more questions, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. So
perfect. I didn't know if that was a question or it looks like a comment. So
yes, I believe that they enjoyed your cider very much, and thank you. Acidity, very good.
So we did just have one pop up. I'm assuming that you must have a website, and I'm sure it's probably here on the card.
I hope I put it on the card.
Available. And you mentioned the limited releases available to club members. Is that the only way that you get in on the limited ones or the special editions?
So if you want them right away, yes. So generally, we'll release products to our club members first before anyone else. And after a period of time, we'll offer them at the tasting room, usually also. And we do have memberships available. So if anyone wants to be a member, I think you can find information on the website, or you can come to the tasting room, have a cider club, and then, figure out what membership level you want.
Yeah, and it's been popular. We actually have quite a few members, and I love it. We do quarterly shipments. You know, you can either do 6 bottles or 12 bottles, and we do it, every quarter. So I think April 1st was one, and then July we'll do another one. And we always just try to do a fun blend. So usually we do kind of our exclusive new one in there, and then we do a couple favorites as well. And so it's always different each quarter. And then we also offer discounts at the tasting room and do some fun events for our Cider Club members. So yeah, definitely if you guys want more info on our website, and it's just unionhillciderco.com if I didn't put it on the tasting sheet. I usually do, but if it's not on there, you can find us online. And you guys can come by too. Our tasting room now is open. We're trying to expand our hours, but we're right now Fridays 3 to 7 and Saturdays 1 to 7. And we're here, it's on our website as well, but we're down past like Highlander Golf Course, right above from Martin Scott. So kind of out towards the airport region. And we have a nice outdoor patio area. So people like bring their kids, bring their dogs.
Yeah,
and
a lot of
it's just
outdoor seating.
very relaxed and a lot of outdoor seating. So we're excited for this warmer weather to be going on.
It makes the outdoor seating a lot better when it's warm.
We'll have a lot more going on. Yes, during the winter, we have those little pods. I love seeing how everybody, all the restaurants in town were trying to figure out, how to have people outside. And we got some of these little like tent pods, but they were clear, and then people could go in there. We had a table in there, and then when it snowed, it was really magical, because then the snow would just like go around you, and we had little heaters in there. So we're excited though that now it's warm and we can just sit wherever.
Nice. Wonderful. Well,
Yeah.
thank you both for joining us today. I'd like to thank all of our participants who participated from home for joining us. And thank you all for supporting the museum through your ticket purchase. We depend on your support, especially now, and I'd like to invite you to consider donating to the museum or becoming a member to make sure we can continue to serve our community and offer programs like this. Just so everyone knows, unfortunately, we had to cancel next month's Made in Wenatchee for the moment. I know Jill is working very hard on this. It was to be charcuterie, I cannot say that word, so I hope that was close, 101. You did get some coupons in your tasting kit, and you can still apply those to the next one, because we are working to schedule a different partner and a different tasting for next time in May. So keep a look for our website and our Facebook page for more information on that. We look forward to seeing, we hope, Drew and Katja again, either in this forum or at your tasting room or at the museum, and some of our people who joined us today at the museum and for some future events. So thank you guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us so much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening, and thank you for letting us share, and we enjoyed it.
Great, thank you. They were fantastic. I enjoyed them very much.
I'd love to come
Good.
visit.
I know. Especially for like a non-cider drinker. I'm glad you enjoyed them. What did you think, Casey?
Really enjoyed it. I'd love to come visit the tasting room sometime soon. I have some family coming into town, so that would be a wonderful thing to take my mom for an afternoon and come taste some cider. So looking forward to that.
Definitely. Yeah, no, thank you guys so much.
Thank you guys. Take care.